So, hello everybody out there, all the Esper family out there. I am really delighted tonight, this afternoon rather, to have Barbara with me, Barbara Marchant, to be able to talk to two actors whom I adore, Marc Menchaca and my son, Michael Esper. I think it's interesting to have both of them. They have had different journeys in their profession, and I think that's fascinating, both coming out of the work at the studio. Michael having done the summer session there with Barbara and then going on to do the BFA program at Rutgers with Barbara, and Marc having been my student for 2 years. But their journeys are very different. Michael's journey has been predominantly the theater. He started in the theater and went, I think he must have been 10 years working in the theater, play after play, with perhaps 2 weeks off in that entire time. An extraordinary journey that way, exhausting, but wonderful way in which to grow. And Marc's journey has been very different in that he has created he's created work for himself in independent film and written scripts and produced them and acted in them, and then got on to do television and film. And so the journeys have been different, but what interests me, and I think Barbara too, we were talking about it this morning, is yes, I'm sure you will all have questions, which we will certainly entertain throughout this, is also how work ethic interests me, is how the work that they did in their training has supported them in what they've done professionally, and how also it's been a part of their way in which they have collaborated, let's say, a way in which managed to get new parts, because I think how you work speaks to other people, and it's through that you manage to get additional work as well and make a network for yourself. So anyway, here we are with the two of them, Marc Menchaca in England, Michael in Greenpoint, Barbara and I on the border of Massachusetts and New York on various sides of the state line.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's right. So I don't know with whom we shall begin. So the first thing is the two of you were just in the same project together. That's extraordinary that you should wind up that way. But maybe talk about that, those first days initially. I remember, Marc, there were times when you, heartbreaking to me when I heard that you were about to leave the business, heartbreaking to me. But it didn't happen. Something would always happen, and you managed to get a job. But they were not easy times. Beginnings are not easy. They're certainly not easy. So speak to me a bit about that.
About like the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I was, I mean, after I finished, I didn't have a manager or an agent or anything. And I started, it's funny. So I would get done with, waiting tables or whatever. I would go, I'd go home, I'd go through all the breakdowns, package everything up, and then I'd scoot around town, dropping off headshots and whatnot for different projects, just trying to get something. And I did that as well as I started meeting some casting directors, because I just didn't know anybody. I ended up doing one-on-one mostly, but I really just started going to meet casting directors because I felt everything else was kind of useless, like meeting agents and whatnot there. And it ended up working. I ended up having a self-submission through a casting director I'd met, and she called me in for Generation Kill. And it was like 2 years of waiting tables and running around town. And at the same time I had stopped in and talked to, right before Generation Kill, I'd stopped in and talked to an office, like one of the Marine Corps offices.
Yes.
And Generation Kill ended up coming up, and kind of when I was in the middle of that, and I decided I'd go. go play a Marine rather than actually join. So, but yeah, but then, you know, I don't know, I'm sure Michael can attest to this. You know, you get one thing and you think, oh, I'm there. Like things are gonna work from here on. And then it's the same thing. It's like you gotta just it never stops.
Yeah.
The pounding the pavement with it. So, and some things get you more recognition than others, which is great. But it's still work, getting work.
Yeah.
That is part of it.
It is like, it's something I was thinking about. It's so funny you said that, because I was thinking about that while you were talking about how, like, there's so many opportunities. I mean, the bad way to look at it is like, there's so many opportunities to like get disappointed or like be frustrated. You know what I mean? I mean, there's also a lot of things to celebrate, but there's always that pitfall of like, I think because somewhere in our heads with this profession, like we get it, this idea of like making it, you know what I mean? Like that language like gets in our heads. And so we get this idea that like, we're going to achieve some definable thing. And then on the other side of that accomplishment is going to be, you know, the untold career of our dreams. You know what I mean? Where in reality, it's much more like, you know, those accomplishments tend to just reveal more challenges. You know what I mean? Maybe a better level of challenge. You know what I mean? Like you're, you know, it's not that things don't get better as you accomplish things, or that your career doesn't get better, or like your life doesn't expand, your options don't expand. But I'm sure it exists for people, you know, the golden ticket moment, the golden ticket job. But I don't know that kind of sustained like win, you know, where you're just like, all right, I did it. That's it. Now we just woo, you know. I don't know if that really exists. And I think on some immature level, I thought and still think on a certain level that it does, you know, and I'm always sort of like battling that idea. But, you know, so like when I got out of school, it was like, I mean, I came out of Rutgers and showcased, and I got some interest from managers, and I met with some managers in New York, and but could not get an audition really, and nobody would really sign me. I didn't have an agent. I worked with an agent named Marc Menchaca for a little while, like sort of hip pocketed. I would go out on an audition maybe once every couple months, you know, and I had a girlfriend at the time who was with Abrams, who got scooped up out of school with Abrams. She was going out like fucking like 9 times a week, like steady. It was brutal. I was living with you, Mom and Dad, mostly, and scared. And eventually I got a job. Eventually I got an agent through a casting director who had seen me, recommended me to this woman, Teresa Wolf, and she picked me up and signed me. And then I booked this job at New Jersey Shakes, this tiny little part at New Jersey Shakespeare in Merchant of Venice. And then somebody dropped out of a play at Trinity Rep, and I got that job somehow and did that. And then I started working regional theater jobs here and there, in small parts, kind of all over, like Cleveland and where the fuck else was I? Texas. I was in Texas and Dallas and other places. And
I remember that time, Michael, and Bill would say to you, work begets work.
Yeah.
Work begets work.
Well, yeah. I mean, and it's true. And at the time, I mean, it was just about saying yes to everything. I mean, there was nothing I was going to turn down. I mean, I mean, yeah, it played out exactly that way. Work did beget work. I think those people directors I worked with on those little regional theater jobs, or people who were the artist director there. I mean, people move around a lot. Actors that I worked with on those jobs. I mean, the artist director of Trinity Rep at the time, where I did that play, was Oscar Eustace, who now is artistic director of the Public. And so I started my relationship with him there. I think even though there wasn't a lot of glamour attached to those jobs, and there certainly wasn't a lot of money attached to those jobs, I started very slowly laying a foundation for what will become like a fairly consistent theater career. But anyway, so then next thing you know, I'm like working in New York. Then I got my first play in New York in this tiny part, and then like as a ball boy at Lincoln Center, and then I got a slightly bigger part in like Shakespeare in the Park, and then another one in like Suburbia at Second Stage, and suddenly I'm like working at all these theaters that I've always dreamed about working at, like Playwrights Horizons, MPC, and Second Stage, and Shakespeare in the Park, and I am absolutely destitute. I can't pay my rent. It's a very confusing time to be like realizing this dream on the one hand, and still be asking my mom and dad for help with my rent, you know, even though I've been working nonstop at these theaters. So it's so confusing to feel like you're succeeding on the one hand and feel like you're failing so hard on the other, and your ability to support yourself. But it was about 10 years before I could get a television job at all. I think it was like a Law and Order. And then Michael Mayer, who was then I started working on Broadway, and anyway. And then Michael Mayer cast me in a TV job. And yeah, man, it paid so good. It was all, I couldn't believe it was the first time I experienced any kind of financial stability in work at all. It was stunning. And I learned a lot. But that I was able to sort of like experience what a set was like and what working on camera meant, and acting, building an arc and stuff like that over the course of a season without any real pressure. You know, we shot the whole thing before it aired. But anyway, it just was like a slow and steady build like that. But yeah. But then there was like periods where it's like, well, am I ever going to work in television? Like, am I ever going to work again? You know, will I ever get a series regular again? It's just like that stuff like keeps coming up. It's wild.
Yeah. One thing I remember, it must have been in 2013, because I'd done Homeland, and it had already come out, and it was like pilot season or something. And this guy, Mir Aronson, who did one episode on Homeland, who then went on, like Amir works like crazy. But I saw him in this room, and he said, "Hey, I just wanted to say that I really loved your work in Homeland." And I was like, "Oh, thanks, man." He was like, "Yeah, I did an episode." And then once I thought about it, I was like, "Oh yeah, I remember that episode." But he goes, "That show is going to change your life." And I was like, "Wow." And then I was like waiting for that show to change my life. and literally, it was about a year and a half ago. It was the first time it was ever mentioned when I got a job.
Wow.
I got an offer for recurring on this show, and the showrunner called me and he said, "You know, the reason that I wanted you for this is because of your work in Homeland." And I was like, 6 years. 6. But, and then one other thing is just about that, like, feeling like, I don't think you ever get over that fear of getting that next job. It was like 11 years ago, I was on a flight with Black Danner, and we got to talking, and she was still having the same conversations that we had, that you and I have with ourselves about, are we going to get another job at her age? And she has an incredible career. And I was like, we're doomed. We're doomed to always feel this way.
But I feel like I remember Dad saying once, like, if you, I mean, there's a certain comfort in it, right? Is in that, like, if you can really know that, I feel like he said, you know, imagine that you never get to be a big movie star. You never get, you never, like, make it, whatever that means to you, you know, like, that never happens. Do you still want to be an actor? You know? And if you can answer that yes for yourself, you know, then I feel like there's a certain amount of pressure you can take off of it, you know? I mean, making it for me now means something a lot different than it did when I was young, you know, like and also, like, part of the problem is, like, my life has changed so incrementally over time that I don't know, I don't notice it when I look at the difference between what my life is like now and my career is like now versus what it was like, you know, 15 years ago or whatever. I mean, the change is, it's drastic as fuck. I mean, it's crazy, you know, and the life that I'm able to have now because of it. But there was no moment where it was like, oh, this is it, you know, like, I did it, you know, like, now I'm all right, you know.
Yeah. Well, and I will say, I remember when I went to dinner with Suzanne, because I'm not blowing smoke up your ass or anybody else's. I've always admired your career, Michael, and your work in the theater and, like, everything you do. It's always made me very happy to hear what you're doing. And I remember going to dinner with your mom last December, and we were talking, and said I was going to Atlanta to do this thing, and it was probably about 15 minutes after I'd mentioned that, she was like, yeah, Michael's going down to Atlanta to work on a show, something Stephen King. And I was like, what? We're going to be, and then I was so very excited to get to be a part of it.
It was amazing. We didn't get to work together at all on it, but you're so good on it.
I didn't get to work with many people at all.
Right.
I was with myself.
I know.
But it was, I was super excited.
Yeah, me too.
Barbara, you had a question about, I think, about originating plays or whatever.
Oh yeah, something I wanted to talk to Michael about is that you've done so much theater, and in particular, new work. You've originated so many roles.
Yeah.
Can you talk about what that process is like?
It's really thrilling. It's sort of my favorite thing to do. It's very exciting to be realizing something for the first time and making something for the first time with people in a room. You know what I mean? It's just like, it's hard to replicate that feeling, and that feeling of service also. Like, there's just an extraordinary feeling of, like, in the process of creating something new and working for something, to put something new into the world that you believe in. And so the rewards of it, I feel like, are really great. I mean, the actual process itself can differ so much depending on who's involved creatively, like depending on what the writer is like, you know, like it's hard to lay down any kind of like hard and fast rules about like how that process works, because it can tend to be like extremely individual. Like, you know, like the way Edward Albee worked was very different from the way like Leslie Headland did, or and Tripp, you know, or like or the way Kushner works. Or I mean, Albee was so, he was very prescriptive. He was very yeah, tough. He was so tough. You know, very specific. Like Albee sees the whole play in his head before he, as he writes it. You know what I mean? So he has a very specific idea before he even comes into the room of how it should be staged and performed. And that's what he wants to see. And if you're not doing that, then he wants to know why. Other people are much more open, you know, like working with Ivo van Hove and De Walsh on Lazarus or whatever. Like he was someone who was extremely open to ideas and seemed like he had very little idea at all when we showed up of how specifically that show should be done, or like how you should do a scene. We would arrive and he'd be like, I don't know, maybe stand here and then, I don't know, do it. I don't know, you know? And then you'd be like, okay, and just do it. And you sort of stumble your way through it. Like Kushner was someone whose ideas were stronger than that, but the new work I worked on with him, he had next to no written material when we started. So we began with him just talking to me about the character, and then slowly written material scenes would start to come in over time, and we'd sit and do them for him and read them through, which was sort of my favorite way of doing it, I think, of all of them. Yeah, but it's very thrilling, and there's a certain amount of, I feel like, freedom that you have when you're creating a character and working on a new play. There's
Well,
like a thrill. What's that?
I would think, especially when, well, like if the Tony Kushner, he wants you to to help realize something, and so that it's a true collaboration. Yeah.
It's also, I think there tends to be more openness in the room.
Right.
Like people are looking for, everybody's trying to investigate this play. It's like the question of like, what is this, is more alive, I think, in the room with a new play than I think with an older play that everybody comes with a set of ideas about it that are much more fixed. I
think that was a rather exceptional experience, though, the one with Kushner's Intelligent Homosexual, because at the time he was involved in the film with Spielberg, and he was so ensconced and had a deadline to meet. So all he did was he got together actors that he wanted to work with out of an idea that he had in his head without a script. And all the actors had to sign on, having never read anything, just on the basis of we're going to work with Kushner. So you went off to the Guthrie, and there was no script, period, at all. I mean, just a few pages of what he had. That's an extremely experience. In fact, you kept getting text until right through the run. You would get.
Yeah, we text scenes that hadn't been written yet. Yeah,
exactly. Was there a lot of, did it feel like exercise work in a sense, where you would improvise and then and then he would write?
No, there wasn't a lot of that. I mean, no. There may have been, but I wasn't involved in it. So he wasn't creating off of anything that, he didn't give us circumstances and then we would do some improvised stuff at all. He would just write, and then we'd sit down. I mean, it was the most incredible thing I mean, he talked to me about what he was thinking about, who this person was, and my circumstances, but he also wasn't sure about a lot of things. He'd be like, I think he may be lying about this. I'm not sure that Eli is his real name. Like things like that. And then I would just like work on those things. And then I'd get a call that would be like, Tony's got a scene. And I'd go in and I'd sit down with Steven Spinella and read this scene that was like hot off the printer for Michael Greif and Tony Kushner that had just been written. And it was just so, it was very wildly beautiful. Yeah. But then he would go off and invent more, like maybe, but that was it. I didn't do any work to generate material.
Got it. Right. Wildly alive. Beautiful.
Yeah. Beautiful. How has it been like for both of you? We're working with different directors, using the work that you've had at the studio and having to adapt it to different directors. Some of them are very hands-on, some of them are not, some of them are giving you results. I know that was a tricky one when you first got out of school, was to be thrown results, as opposed to directors who are going to work with you out of cause and effect, let's say.
I will have to say, I think, I think over time, I think it's really been helpful to realize that you have to learn how to talk to the director as well as how they talk to you, or just being able to kind of boil down if a director isn't speaking to you in your language, just say, okay, this is what you're saying. I'm going to get it down to this specific action that you want. And then, there are times where you have to say, fuck it, that's what you want, then I'll give it to you. And then you can have your shot and then we'll go on. It doesn't happen most of the time, but I don't know. I guess you kind of get to know. It's fun for me to watch directors now, like especially after working with. I don't know what your experience with Jason Bateman was, but Jason is very attentive to the actors and does let you play, though he will kind of throw a wrench in to kind of manipulate some of their way, and it may come out completely differently than what you think. Did you work with Karin Kusama at all, Michael?
I don't think so.
She did episode 6 on The Outsider. I couldn't remember.
Maybe briefly, maybe just one scene, but I don't think so.
She was one of the best that I've worked with. I actually love working with women directors. I don't know why. I just like find the ones that have their shit together, like really have their shit together. And I don't know, maybe they're more in tune with the feelings of actors. I have no idea, but I've just found that over the years. And then Jason has been one of my favorites, but I mean, it's kind of just, it's like, I feel like I don't think about it every, when I go to work, but now I feel much more comfortable in a conversation with director, knowing or being able to kind of decipher what exactly they're saying to me while not getting in my head and kind of going back to the basics and saying, okay, here's what we have to do. I don't know if that answers your question or not, but.
Yeah. There is a question here from someone, from John C., who says, have you ever had a director that was extremely difficult to work with? And if you did, how did you deal with it? Michael, I know this is true from my own experience with you. No director. No. Okay. But anyway, have you ever have a director that was extremely difficult to work with? And if you did, how did you deal with that?
Look, sometimes, I mean, it depends. I think it depends, like, in the way in which the director's difficult, and also how much I feel like I need him or her.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
I mean, ideally, like, I remember working with this terrible director once on this production of really early on. And he was so bad. He just didn't know anything about acting. And we would go in there. I mean, I wasn't alone. We'd go in there and we would just fight with him. And just all day, just fighting and fighting. And I'd get done with rehearsal and I'd call up and I'd call Dad. And I would be telling him these stories about what an idiot this guy was. And he would laugh so hard. And he'd be like, what are you doing? Why are you fighting? Just like, oh yeah, in 1 ear, out the other. Yeah, I'll try and get that for you next time. And then just do whatever the fuck you want. Like, I don't know why you're like, what are you getting so involved for? So, like, sometimes that is the best advice. Is just like, don't get in the ring. As long as you just are like, you know, you don't have to put your ego on the line. You know, if you feel confident that you can do something that you want to do, that's good. You know what I mean? And you know how to get there. And you really think this director's an idiot or, you know, destructive or whatever, then just don't, I don't think you got to fight, you know, like then just like, okay, yeah. All right. And just fly under that radar and do your own work.
Yeah, sounds good. There's another question here from Robert Grant. It says, based on your training, what is the thing on set that is most absent or most abundant? The thing you always hope is present when you show up or work to help you do your best work.
What is most absent or most present?
Yes, the thing, or abundant. The thing you always hope is present when you show up to or work. When you show up to work, what do you want there to be able to do your best work? Based on your training, what is that thing on set that is most absent or most present that you would need? Space, I would think, some space to do your own work.
Yeah. But I mean, I think I don't know. I think one thing is just the freedom to, you know, I know there are parameters that we have to work within, but getting into those parameters can sometimes be going outside the parameters in order to find a way back in. And I think just being able to express whatever it is that
A sense of freedom is what you're saying on the set, Mark. You have a sense of freedom. Yeah, a sense of freedom. Yeah, sense of play. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that what you'd say, Michael?
100%.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's such a commodity, and it can be so easy to lose on set just because of the way so many sets work, especially in TV, where there's a schedule. You know, so often you can walk into a scene and the scene's already done. You know, it's already blocked. They already know what they want. They already got all your angles. You know what I mean? So there's not a lot of invention in the room left. But it was something that Jason was so good at, I thought. Like, he really knew how to play with you. Like, you know, like give you something, like throw something at you, or like give you a little something here or a little something there that helped you, like knock you off or get you thinking in a different way or get you improvising, you know, like get you free.
Yeah. I think one thing I've learned is, especially if I'm, you know, if it's going into a heavy scene, I've never been one to like ruffle feathers or to be a dick. And I've learned that there are certain times when I can seem like I'm being a dick, like out in my head, that I'm not. And I've kind of learned to go up to a director and say, this is what I need in order to do this scene. I mean, there was a show I worked on, and there were some like production, there were some production things that were royally fucked up in getting me to the set, which was, it completely threw me off. And I remember I went up to the director and I said, here's what I want. I said, I want, you know, we had this space. I said, I want 10 minutes in there by myself. You can set up the shots, but I want 10 minutes by myself, just me. I don't want anybody else in there. Then I want you to bring everybody else in. I don't want anybody to talk. I said, because, you know, because it was, and it kind of went along with the scene as well. So, you know, it was, finally, I felt the freedom to say, this is, I get one chance at this. I mean, whatever, 5 chances, 5 takes, whatever. But if you want what you're hoping to get, and you've told me exactly what you want, then I need this is what I need in order to give you that. And it's, yeah, I mean, I guess that kind of falls into freedom, but it's also like not being afraid to voice what you need as an actor and not just be a puppet who goes in there and they're like, so, okay, so let's like this, let's put you over here and action. Okay, cut,
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Here's a question too, Mark. It says something about your character in Ozark, which had an especially rich and complex arc. Can you talk about how you created that character and calibrated your motivations from one scene to the next? That's a huge issue, but maybe generally about the character.
Well, I didn't know the whole arc of that character when I went in. I didn't find out until like the episode before. Somebody mentioned something to me, and I was like, oh, I guess I didn't know that. So before it was just, I knew the point of view of the character, but going into that next phase of the character was, I mean, I was so excited about it because it was, when it comes down to it, the basics of it are falling in love with someone. Just, I'd never done that with a man, which was, I was super excited that I got to do that, because there's not a lot of people that would cast me as a gay man, I don't think. There may be some Twitter followers that would, but it was, I don't know, for me, it's just doing the basic work of knowing the point of view from one thing to the next, and um, surrendering to the wants and the desires of that character. And I loved the character. That was like one of the first characters that I've really I had a hard time letting that guy go. There were a lot of tears when I got the call that Russ was going. But yeah, it wasn't that hard once I just like completely fell in love with it.
You're
You're
mute, Mom.
muted. You're muted.
My dog is interfering. You created a lot of work on your own, Marc. There are people that are asking about that process. You did a lot, that some of those independent films that you began, you wrote, as I recall as well. The process
I was
of
broke.
getting your work.
Couldn't get a job.
You were broken, couldn't get a job. There was the motivation. But then you have to get it seen. That's the issue. How do you get it?
I mean, fortunately for us, this is where we live. Alexa Fogel came on as an executive producer, and she knows the festival circuit. So we did have we had somebody on our team that was in that world already. But really, I think it was like making the best thing that we could, and then once we got it out, and once we got into South by Southwest, I don't think it hurt that we shot in Texas, being the South bys in Austin, but we didn't know anybody. Like, we didn't have anybody on the inside that gave us that passed us on. It was just we got good performances from the people that from the actors that we cast, and that was the one that's been the feedback that I think was key to the film, was like that all the actors were like, everybody loved the characters and the acting, and that's one of the biggest, and we made a story work. It didn't suck, I guess you could say, maybe in some people's minds, but the saying is, if it doesn't suck, it might be good. So yeah, but I mean, I think that's I think creating your own work is first of all, it gives you a different perspective.
Yes.
Once you make it, or in the process of making, like from the writing to shooting, you learn a ton. And you also, I remember that was one of the first times that I realized because I used to get a little bit anxious or nervous when a director wouldn't say anything to me, and I would get very self-conscious and be like, am I, I'm not getting the affirmation. I'm not getting, he's not telling me I'm doing a good job. And when we shot our film, I remember an actor said something to me, and I was like, no, you're great. Like, if I'm not saying anything to you, you just keep doing what you're doing. And it finally like came together for me, and I was like,
that's so interesting.
Oh.
It's interesting you say that, Marc, because that's, I think, the whole theory behind Sandy's, when I was studying with Sandy, that you would get a one-word response. He would say, that's okay, it's okay. That's all he ever said, was that's okay. And it was really just what you're talking about, so that you never developed the need to hear anything more. You just did your work. If you didn't hear anything, you were okay. That was it. And you didn't need any kind of hyperbole around you at all. You just solidly did your work, period. And there's a first-year student that has a question. How has the studio informed or influenced work that you are most proud of?
I just would never know how to begin to separate out the studio and the work that I learned from Barbara and my parents from anything I've ever touched as an actor or approached. It's just it's the cornerstone, it's the touchstone of like everything I approach and do. It's all those are the things I think about every time I go to work. So I mean, you know, I wouldn't even know where to begin to. It's the whole ball game. I mean, you know, I wouldn't even know where to begin. It's just, I don't think I think about it all the time necessarily. I mean, a lot of it is unconscious. I think after a while, you sort of do unconscious stuff that you learn, but yeah, it's also the thing that I keep learning from. I mean, I think one thing I didn't realize at the time that I was in school was that like you're not supposed to be perfect in class. Like you're not supposed to like master everything at the time. You work for it. You're supposed to work hard for it. You know, you're supposed to work as hard as you possibly can towards that end. But then that's work that you then continue for the rest of your life. And that failure and failing in class is healthy and what's supposed to happen. Like, and afterwards, you know, it's like, that's what work looks like. And I don't think I really understood that at the time, you know, that this is work that I was going to be learning from for the rest of my life,
Yeah.
you know, and, you know, so I'm still learning about stuff that I learned in Barbara's class. Every time I go to work, I'm like still learning more stuff about actions and stuff and everything, you know, and how to work. But yeah.
You know, it's funny. Like every time every time I have a scene where I go to a door,
Oh.
or I come to
Oh
a door,
yeah.
I literally I think about it every time. Like like when I go, there's a purpose behind that knock or whatever. And you know, there's things I wish I've said many times. I wish I could go back and do the studio again, because I remember those moments in class, and I oddly have don't blush, Suzanne, but there are a lot of times where when I'm in my trailer beforehand, as you all probably know, Suzanne has a very soothing voice, and I can't specifically say what I hear, but I'll just take a moment to myself before I go in. Usually if it's, you know, if it's something that is, if it's quite a bit to bite into, and I'll go back to, I go back to those moments in class when when I would hear you speak, and you know, I've called Suzanne before about certain things that, and it goes back to just like those basic elements of like those first year things, and you know, it's funny when you know, over the years I've been like, wow, you kind of put the pieces together and be like, that's what that was about. That's what those exercises,
Yep.
it comes back into the work. I don't know. I think that, just like Michael said, I feel like I discover on jobs, I discover things that take me back 15, 16 years to a moment that I may not have realized back then, that I'll be like, holy shit, that's what I thought about. I thought about oh gosh, the Spoon River. I thought about the Spoon River characters the other day. We've been kind of just like fooling around with we've been writing here, and I started thinking about the Spoon River characters, and I still have that book, and I'll go back and read some here and there. I don't know. There's so many things. It's indispensable for me, the work that I did at the studio when it comes to work. And like Michael said, it's not like you think about it. It's not like you think about it when you go into work, but what you do in the studio informs you so much, whether you know it or not, when you do work, when you step in and say, here I am. I don't know. It was two of the best years that I've had.
Aw. Sweet. That's sweet. That's how I felt about my training too, Mark. Two of the best years of my life, no doubt about it. One of the film teachers is asking both of your experiences between the differences between working in the different mediums, between working on camera and between working on stage. And also this difference between film and television too, all of those different mediums, it's different. How do they differ for you?
Michael's probably best equipped to answer that. Put you on the spot.
There's a lot of differences. I don't know that the differences have to do with performance necessarily. I think that one thing that one of the big differences has to do with the length of the process you have as an actor, or in terms of the work you're doing collaboratively with other people. I mean, your process when you're working on a piece of film or television can start as soon as you get the job individually, like privately. But oftentimes you don't get a rehearsal process, really. Your rehearsal process consists of showing up on the day, and you get maybe 10 or 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes, maybe before you shoot a scene, working it out, that's more often than not how that transpires. Whereas in a play, you get a couple weeks, hopefully, to rehearse something in a room with the people you're going to do it with, and build something over time. So that's a huge difference. And so the kind of preparation that I want to have done when I show up on set is different from the kind of preparation I want to have done when I show up for rehearsal on the first day. I'm not necessarily interested on showing up for the first day of rehearsal with a lot of to throw a lot of ideas on the table about what I think the player character should be. I'm interested in, I'll have those ideas, but I'm just going to let stuff happen for a little while and see what's going on in the room, and see what my relationships are with these people, and see what I can learn. I'm learning stuff, rather than trying to prescribe too much right away. But when I show up on set, I want to have some strong ideas already about how I want to do things, because I don't have time to discover a lot of stuff. I want to be ready to throw those things away should discoveries be available to me. You know what I mean? Like if there's, I may have a strong idea, a couple of ways I want to do this scene, but if I get in the room and I'm getting something different from my partner or from the director or from the room or something, then that's going to all go out the window potentially, you know? Because that's the thing that's going to be the best thing, is whatever's happening right there is always going to be more valuable. But that's really the main shit. I mean, like the size of the performance, I mean, it's nice on film to be able to work so small. You can really do so little, and that's fucking sweet. It's nice to like act a scene in a car and like actually be in a car. Like all that stuff is real great. It's nice to be able to you don't actually have to do a performance on film. You don't ever have to do a performance. Like in a play, if you want to have a lot of colors in your performance or whatever, or you want to lay something into your character, you have to actually do that, you know, beat by beat. On film, you can just take passes at a scene. You can do a pass at a scene. I'm talking badly in terms of quality, but you can do a really playful pass at a scene. Like I saw Noah Baumbach work with Greta Gerwig this way. You can do one that's like really, that's completely different. That's like heavier. That's more critical. You know what I mean? That's more negative. You can do one that's more positive, and then he will take those things, and out of them, he will edit together a performance that never happened. You know, and that happens a lot. And you know, but that requires a lot of trust in a director. You know, and I wouldn't necessarily work that way, but Greta Gerwig and Noah Baumbach can do that together because you know they can. But it's interesting to me that a lot of performances you see on film never are performances that never happened. You
They
know,
have the editing.
Wow.
yeah.
I will say that you know, like Michael's talking about, that's the beauty about doing theater, is that you carry this performance throughout, and you go through it, and it's, you know, every single night. I will say one thing I remember this on Ozark, the scene where Jason Beller-Harner, who played the FBI agent, where he reveals that he's an agent, and I realized that I'm fucked, and that that none of this has been, it's all been a ruse. It was going to be a long day, and I had to fly back to New York that night. That was my last day of shooting. So there were a few things there were some things on the table and Jason was directing, and we didn't go to lunch that day because he was trying to get me on my flight. And we were I had done a lot of prep for this scene. And we wanted to go rehearse because there were some stunts, and you know, you get learning to work with, especially when you have a scene that has a lot of weight, learning to work with doing the stunts and them setting up the shots and changing the lighting and whatnot, and like you feel like you're ready, and then there's something, we gotta can you just move here or whatever, and that all, you know, gets in your head. And they wanted to rehearse the scene with these stunts, and I'm pretty hesitant. I was like, okay, I'll go in there, but I knew that it was going to be touchy because I was ready to go that morning. Got in there, kind of walked through it, did it, and played with some ideas. Then Jason was like, all right, well, let's just go like maybe like 3/4, just like doing this like flip over the bed and whatnot. And I could feel, this was just a lesson that I learned in this scene. I could feel things starting, like things were going in motion for me. And we go 3/4 and I lost it. It was like I had just come out of my mother's womb. I was a baby. And we stopped, and I had to go, and I had to like ice my eyes, and then we went back in, and I'm thinking, oh, you know, we'll get right back to it. And then we ended up doing the other coverage, and we did Jason's coverage. So we were doing Jason's coverage, and I remember the first take, Jason said, and this is I thought back to my studio days. Because after the first take, Jason said, I just heard him from the video village. He said, Mark, don't blow your load, man. You got a long day ahead of you. Yeah. And, you know, part of me was like, but I want to give Jason Butler-Harner everything that he needs for the scene. And like how that's the selfish thing about film and TV, that you kind of have to learn, not that you don't give them everything, but there was a moment that we needed in that scene that I couldn't, you just can't produce that for 9 hours. You go dry. But, you know, learning to work with that in TV and film, to where you have to give certain things when it's needed, and to realize that you're not a dick for maybe holding off until the camera gets what it needs from you.
Yeah.
Whereas you just got to give it every night on the stage.
Right.
Yeah. Someone was saying here, what's it like to work with people who haven't been trained your way? Has you found any difficulty with that? That's a common question that students ask. What's going to happen to me if I'm cast in something and someone hasn't been Meisner trained? How do I work with that?
I think that's the beauty of Meisner, is like, you just respond to him. And don't,
yeah.
You know, you hold your point of view, and you do what you're doing. You know, I've laughed at people before just because I have seen something extremely false and something, you know, curated that maybe eventually breaks. But I don't know. I mean, listen, I talked to, I was talking with Jason's never had a day of training in his life.
Yeah.
He learned, and
Who, Bateman?
But what's that?
Bateman?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we were talking about this. It came up because of you. I sat down in his office, and I was like, my buddy Michael Esper's coming on here. He's like, yeah. And I was like, yeah, I studied with his mom and his dad. And he goes, is he real actory? And I was like, no. He's like, yeah, you know, I really like him. I just didn't know what it was going to be like when he came in the room or anything.
But that's the thing. It's like, yeah, it doesn't come up that often, honestly. It's not like people are like, so let's talk about process.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, you just, nobody's really gunning to talk about process. No. If you don't talk about it, they're not going to talk about it. you know, you just respond. You get what people. I mean, dealing with results. That's the biggest thing. I feel like, I don't know, like learning how to translate very result oriented direction. I feel like that's mostly the hardest thing. But most actors, I feel like, have a vocabulary that, and directors, that you can understand or apply pretty easily. I don't think there's some huge gap of understand. I mean, sometimes. No, never mind. There is. No, there is sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you can worry about it. I think you just do it. I mean, I'm sure that you've worked with people, Michael, that you know have not had a day of training or a day on a job before. But if you're just present and real, you can't make somebody change who they are and how they approach it. But I think you naturally may bring in a different energy, and you bring them down to just listening and responding if you can get there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think it's never come up, like, other than the fact that there were like 75 Esper actors on Outsider.
Yeah, totally.
That was
It was
amazing.
crazy. Yeah.
It was crazy. He didn't know it when he was casting. He just cast them. That was amazing.
Amazing.
That was amazing. You know, it's been over an hour. We're going to keep you for an hour. So with lots of questions here, do you have anything you want to talk about, Barbara?
I just want to listen to you guys.
Yeah, I know. I'm having a good time listening
Me
too.
too.
Shuffling through questions here awkwardly, trying to scan some of these because there are a lot of them. Here's one from Deb Jackal. Here's one from Deb Jackal, who we adore. So she says, can you talk about your audition experiences over the course of your careers? How those experiences have changed as your careers have evolved, and give the students any advice about auditioning? And certainly you have the difference between here and Europe, Michael, that's for sure. But the auditioning experience.
You know, I think Deb will know what I'm talking about. And I don't mean this to sound, I don't mean it to sound as it is gonna sound. But I think if you're, you know, with an audition, you go in, you have, it's your one shot at this thing. My thing that I've learned over the years, I'm gonna be prepared. I'm gonna go in knowing my shit, and also learning how to not give a fuck. And in the sense that this is what I'm bringing to you, and and there you go, have it, and I'm gonna walk out the door. That's my. I mean, it's all about being prepared for it, and then also being able to say, there you go, have a good day. Maybe I'll see you. Because I have to walk away from them after I do them.
Yes, yeah, you do.
But also, it does change as you know, as you go along. You get to know casting directors. You become more comfortable in the room, and but I think, you know, I think you always have to remember that just by the fact that you're in the room, they want you on the dance floor. They're not bringing you in if they don't want you there. So you have to know that, like, when you first go in, they want you on the dance floor.
Yeah, they do.
There may be 75 reasons that they say yes and 75 reasons they say no, but it's not personal. but as long as you're prepared and you go in and you do your work,
Yeah.
they're going to bring you back in for something else.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's important. What about you, Michael?
I mean, I have a very contentious relationship, volatile relationship with auditioning. Like I wish I had a solid thing to say about it, but I really go back and forth in terms of like what I feel like is working for me and what I feel like isn't. I I um I sometimes I feel good about auditioning, and sometimes I really fucking hate it. I'm like, what is this fucking circus? I don't understand. Like, what are we doing? It's like I I I know that if I like what I'm doing and I find a way to like, for me, for whatever reason, I have to, the more I like what I'm working on and what I'm doing, the more protected I feel from any kind of negative feelings about the experience itself or what happens afterwards. Um, like, if I go into an audition with a lot of secret negative feelings about the project or like what I have to do in the scene or whatever, it's gonna show up. You know, it shows up. Like I don't know. So my best defense is like creating a positive relationship with the, you know, I gotta fall in love with it somehow. I gotta like fall in love with it a little bit and find something in what I'm doing that I love. It could even just be a couple moments. It could just be like a fucking moment that I just like am really into. You know, like I'm not gonna like lay into that moment and be like, and here it is, but like, you know, just I'll know it so that I have something, so that it's not just about me like getting in front of a casting director to do an audition to get a job. Like, cause that thing I really don't like it. I mean, in London, like, yeah, auditioning in London, it was very different. I found that they really, they were longer and more involved in terms of, you know, like, my audition for Danny Boyle for Trust, I got 6 episodes to read for my, it was a callback. It was my first time meeting him. He gave me 6 episodes. He was like, pick a couple things to work on. We went in, we talked for a while. And he was like, what do you want to do? Let's work on this. And then I read with him and we read a scene together. And then he was like, yeah. All right, let's do it again. And it was like, we were working. He was like, what do you want to do? And I was like, all right, let's try this. And I felt like we were working on something. It was, and so then I left and I was like, we did some shit, you know? I was like, I want it, but I don't care, you know? But it's hard for me to feel like that sometimes in auditions. But anyway, I don't know. So I don't know.
It is. It's a funny, auditioning is a funny, it's a funny thing for an actor because on one hand, there are times where it feels like it's your only lifeline. And other times where it seems like the most annoying thing in the world. I mean, eventually I told, it's like a dog or something, whining. You know, after however many years, 7 years of auditioning for Blue Bloods. And like, there were times where I was like, I mean, where I gave the best audition I ever would have given. I like had everything in it. Just, I mean, you know, my wife all of a sudden dies and everything lets loose. Like, I was like, there's no way I'm not going to get that job, and didn't get the job. And then, you know, after 7 years of auditioning for them, I finally said, I'm not auditioning anymore because you've seen every character I'm ever going to play. I finally got so annoyed with it. I was like, I'm just not going to do it. And then they felt bad enough that they gave me one eventually. But no, I mean, as Deb will tell everybody, it's about being prepared and knowing what you're doing when you walk in the door. And then I think just being able to walk out and say, you should take me, but if you don't want me, fuck it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Those important 2 words for freedom.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, because
Mantra.
sometimes I feel like, because every once in a, I feel like one of the dangers I get into with auditioning is this feeling of having to get it right, you know, which is, I feel like it's so deadly to good acting most of the time, or like acting that feels good to do also, you know. It's like I gotta like get the scene right, you know, or like I gotta get the audition right, I gotta like do it. So, you know, every once in a while I need to, this is terrible advice, but every once in a while I will not prepare.
Yeah.
I'll do as little preparation as I possibly can. I mean, I'll look at it, I'll be like, all right, I got it. That's enough. And then I'll go with whatever I have. Like, because I need to like, and I've booked jobs that way. I have lost a lot of jobs that way, I also know. but I need to refresh that feeling of like, I don't know what I'm like, I want to like be prepared and not know what I'm doing.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
Surprise yourself.
Yeah.
It's an interesting question, I think. In the times in both of your careers, beginning or more recent, where things were rough or you felt creatively blocked, what were things that kept you going or helped you to do the work when you thought you couldn't?
I would say, I mean, before Ozark, I was like 9 months without a job. I couldn't get arrested, and when I auditioned, I had something else that I had to get done that day. That I walked in the room and I was like, we got to get this done fast, because I had to get my passport to like a courier to take to the airport to go to LA. I was going to China. Well, I didn't know where I was going, but a buddy of mine who was like working was going somewhere, which kind of gave me the freedom to be like, I couldn't obsess over the audition. I knew it, but I couldn't like obsess over it. But I think the thing that has kept me going is that there's absolutely nothing else that I want to do but be an actor. If I could be something else, I would answer that question with I'll go and do it. But I don't, I wouldn't be happy. That's why I think that's why Michael does it. Why we all, you know, if you can go do something else, then go do something else. But my motivation is like, I need that, I need to feed myself with that creatively. Or I'd go fucking crazy. Crazier than I am. But.
The downtimes are hard in between, I'm sure. Having something other that creative to do, whether you write or whether, I know, Michael, you play music, write music, to have or do readings or whatever you can do to keep yourself creatively connected can be very helpful when you're not getting the part, or open you up in a different way. If it's not acting, it can open you up in a different way. That's a way of staying connected too. But Sandy used to say that too. It was to be very shocking to be a first-year student and or even in the early days of the first year, have someone say to you, someone you truly respected, to say to you, if there's anything else you can do, please go do it. Go do it now. You can be happy. Could you imagine yourself being happy doing anything other than this? Please go. And he prefaced a class that way. Nobody left. Nobody left, nobody left. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think,
But
what? I'm sorry, Michael?
oh no, but yeah. No, nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing more to say? Okay. Nothing more to say. Okay. Well, I think we've kept you for a while now. I'm so grateful for both of you being here, and I'm sure the students will love it. I'm sure I will be criticized for not taking more questions and throwing them at you. However, I'm really pleased that you're here and sharing so much with us, and enjoy your work and look forward to what's to come.
No.
Maybe you
you.
could take some of those questions and
Send them.
email
Yeah.
a few.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so
Oh.
sweet. Okay, I will go
That's
through.
great.
Yeah, I got time. We got time.
We got
I mean,
time.
Time is here. Time is here. Okay. Well, thank you both very much. Getting late for you, Mark, over in England, and Mike, you can go walk your dog. Okay.
Oh,
so good to see you, Mark. So nice to do this with you, man. Admire you so
Good to
much.
see you,
So good
Michael.
to see
you guys.
too.
Thank you.
Thank
Love
you.
you guys.
Thank y'all.
Thank
See you
you.
soon.
Good to
Thanks,
see you.
everybody.
Bye.
Goodbye, all Esper students there.
Bye. Thank you, Suzanne.
Thank you, Barbara. Bye-bye.